So each of them are going to give a presentation around 9 or 10 minutes and, of what they do. And then after that, we'll get into the discussion. So who do I pick on first? Harry, it's going to be you.
I think so. Great. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. It's great to have this opportunity to tell you about Growing Home and to have the conversation with my colleagues, Naomi and John, who I work with regularly. Growing Home is a unique organization. We are at the juncture of social enterprise through our urban farm enterprises on the south side of Chicago, transitional jobs, working with people with barriers to employment, and community development, focusing on the Englewood community. Our mission is to operate, promote, and demonstrate the use of organic farming as a vehicle for job training, employment, and community development. I focus on the word vehicle because it's not just about growing food and urban farming, but urban farming I see as a vehicle for other things, as a vehicle for creating jobs, as a vehicle for revitalizing communities, especially communities such as Englewood. We got our start about 20 years ago when Les Brown from the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless had this idea to do urban farming with homeless people. At the time, people said he was nuts. Urban farming wasn't this big, exciting thing that it is today. But Les had a vision, and his vision focused on working with people. He understood what homeless people needed. He wrote that homeless people are often without roots. They're not tied down, not connected, not part of their family anymore. Our organic farming program is a way for them to connect with nature, to plant and nourish roots over a period of time. When you get involved in taking responsibility for caring for something, creating an environment that produces growth, then it helps build and create self-esteem. Les passed away in 2005, but his vision lives on, and we've seen since then that it works. We've created an employment training program that's trained over 350 people since 2002 through our 4 USDA-certified organic farms, 3 of which are on the south side of Chicago. People who come to us have many barriers to employment. Most of them have been incarcerated. Many of them have been homeless. Many struggle with substance abuse. And our goal is to give them a new chance, to give them a new opportunity, a new way of living, and to help them transform their lives. And we've seen that it works. We've seen that people who come in who had been incarcerated, over 95% of them stay out of prison after they graduate from Growing Home. This, as opposed to what you see usually in Illinois, over 50% of people go back to prison. It's a way of changing lives and changing communities. This is at our Wood Street urban farm that we completed in 2009. We bring a lot of people together. Our staff and our interns, the people we're training, work very closely together. The way we got to Englewood, we had a small urban farm at Sukasa in back of the Yards neighborhood, and we're looking for a place where we could do our own farm. We were invited to be part of a discussion in Englewood about creating a quality of life plan, creating a plan, a way of changing that community and revitalizing the community. An idea that the residents there came up with was to do an urban agriculture district, something totally new, something that would create a large number of urban farms, that would create job training and new opportunities for people, and create economic opportunities in the community so that people will then have access to food in what has been called a food desert because of the lack of access to food in Englewood. Many of you probably have heard that term. We found a vacant lot like there's so many of in Englewood. This is at Wood Street and 58th Street, and working with the city, working with the community, working with many, many partners, they said you can develop this lot. Looks pretty foreboding, not much happening there, just cracked concrete, been that way for over 30 years. And we said, okay, this is going to be our farm. We'll keep that vision going and we'll create a farm on this vacant lot. This is that lot 5 years later. We have 3 hoop houses, which are unheated greenhouses, and we grow and harvest over 15,000 pounds of food on this farm every year, from harvesting from March through the end of December. Farming in Chicago is more than just, people think of corn farms, people think of farming as a 3-4 month business. For us, it's a year-round venture. And then we said, okay, what are we going to do next? Always thinking about the future. How can we work with more people? We started out working with 10 people a year. Now we work with 40 people a year. And how can we create this district so that there will be a large number of farms? There's our Wood Street farm right there, and kitty corner to it is our extension farm, which is now on our A Street farm. Again, another lot that was city-owned, and we had the challenge, how do we develop this farm? We weren't interested in becoming landowners. We worked with the city and with NeighborSpace, which is a community land trust, to start the first urban farm that they would develop. Instead of just doing community gardens as they had in the past, they would actually have an urban farm. This is the site just as it was beginning. Again, vacant, nothing there for many, many years. And the city at this time, by this time I should say, had made some advances and had decided that they were going to promote urban farming. So instead of making us do all of the environmental testing, instead of making us do all the prep, they committed also to supporting our efforts. They did all the preparation, all the environmental testing and cleanup, and then we have our first hoop house at our on our A Street farm. This farm is even bigger. Today we have 1.5 acres between our on our A Street farm and our Wood Street farm, and the city put in $250,000 to make this farm come true. One of the things we learned while doing our work is it's not just about farming, it's not just about job training, it's about developing communities and community outreach. We thought, we'll put up a farm stand, people will come, because that's what people asked. They said they wanted access to food. So in 2007, we put up a farm stand, we were accepting food stamps. Not many people came. And for several years, that's what we saw happening, is we were trying to do outreach, but it was very slow for people to actually come and be involved. What we found is 2011, we hired a full-time outreach manager who brought people in, but also worked on education. It's not just about growing food and having food available. It's also about education, having cooking demonstrations. Every Wednesday, we have an open house where anyone can come in for free, get a tour, be part of a cooking demonstration, and then see how the community changes. And we've seen that change. We've seen hundreds and thousands of people coming to our farm and being a part of it, coming to a safe space. I'm sure many of you hear about Englewood, you hear about violence. And there is violence, certainly all around us. There's shootings, and something we have to challenge. We're challenged with all the time. But we know that there are a lot of good people working together, trying to change that community, and we're working with that community. And by having a safe space where people can come to open house, where they can have a cultural experience, it's the first step towards making that change, toward revitalizing that community through the work that we're doing. And like I said, the city has really bought into urban farming, using food as a catalyst for community development, and we've seen that change. We've seen Advocates for Urban Agriculture, which organization I helped start in 2002. Today, there's over 500 members in AUA with about 1,500 people on a listserv, because people are real interested in this work that we're doing. We've seen the mayor. Mayor Emanuel has come out to our farms a couple times this past year. He really believes that this is a way to help change communities. To make this vision possible, to make it possible to have an urban agriculture district, we started a Greater Englewood Urban Agriculture Task Force to bring about a large number of urban farms, to bring out training and food enterprises. The city has done a lot of land use planning and found just along a 2-mile stretch right where Growing Home is located, there's 28 acres of vacant lots. I don't expect it all to be urban farms, but if you can have 10 acres, 12 acres, you're going to be growing a lot of food and creating a lot of jobs. We've also seen the food enterprises developing. There are 2 cafes opening up in Englewood. Kusanya Cafe is opening up this week. Dream Cafe is opening up very soon. There's going to be a food hub in Englewood that'll have hopefully 100, 150 jobs. Whole Foods is moving to Englewood. And to me, it's about creating opportunities and jobs, creating food options. Many of you live on the north side here, you have options. You can go to Jewel, you can go to Whole Food, you can go to Aldi's. In Englewood, you don't have those options. Any healthy community should have options about where they can get their food from.
About 2 more minutes.
Green Healthy Neighborhoods is a city plan the city has put together, like I said, about Englewood, back of the yards, Washington Park, also looking at Woodlawn. There's a city food plan. There's a lot happening around food, and it's really exciting to see after all these years that this work is coming to fruition. In February, we received the Chicago Community Trust Community Strategy of the Year Award at the Chicago Neighborhood Development Awards, and they put together this terrific video I'd like to show you now.
Healthy eating can be a challenge for anyone, but it's especially hard in communities like Englewood, where fast food is common and fresh produce rare.
Some of the stores have fresh produce, but you really don't see too much. And when you do see it, they really don't know how to take care of it to keep it looking fresh.
In 2005, Teamwork Englewood was exploring ways to bring better nutrition to the community. They approached Growing Home, a social enterprise dedicated to using urban production farms as a vehicle for job training and employment. Together, they struck up a bold vision, an urban agricultural district that would spur economic development on the community's abundant vacant lots.
There probably hadn't been a farm building built in Chicago in 100 years, so this was all new. We see urban agriculture as a tool to develop these communities.
Growing Home's Englewood Urban Farm started modestly, with no electricity and water borrowed from neighbors, but today yields 13,000 pounds of organic produce, expected to triple by 2014. When not at work in the fields and greenhouses, workers receive comprehensive job readiness training that will serve them as they transition to other employment.
When we send people here to Growing Home to apply for employment, guess what? They get hired. They're trained how to come to work every day, how to set those goals, how to make sure you sustain yourself and your family in a responsible way.
Neighbors love to shop at the farm stand and attend workshops on gardening, cooking, and wellness. By rekindling a culture of healthy food in Englewood, the farm is addressing the community's nutritional needs. But Growing Home's vision is far broader.
If you have 10, 20, 30 farms, you're going to have 300 jobs. If you have cafes, if you have different food businesses, if you have a garden center, you're going to have thousands of jobs.
As a community strategy, urban farming can be expansive, but it's rooted in a simple idea.
Just to plant a small seed and to watch it grow into this big mature plant, it's just amazing just to see it grow. It's sort of like raising a child, so it's a good feeling.
$30 seconds to wrap up?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Okay.
I'm really excited to see the changes that have happened over the past 12 years and looking forward to the next 12 years to see how this community is really going to be changed and how additional communities can be changed through food, through farming, and through economic activities and new jobs. Thank you so much.
Very good, very good. John Edel, you are next, my friend.
Sure. I'll launch right in. All right. So the plant is a big project. It's a project that's all about closing loops and trying to find ways to use what we have, not what we wish we had. We're located in a former meatpacking plant, a pork facility in back of the yards, about 47th and Ashland, that shut down in 2007. So we are trying to figure out how to grow food, process food, create jobs, and do it in a sustainable way by closing loops. It's a concept that also comes from biomimicry, where you're looking at nature. How does nature handle waste? How does this cycle of life work? And can we mimic that on an industrial or a food production scale? This is my second project. The first one, just as a little background, is the Chicago Sustainable Manufacturing Center, which is a green business incubator in the Central Manufacturing District that started as an utterly derelict hulk with whole courses of brick peeling away and a white power biker gang occupying the insides of it. It was a motorcycle junkyard. And by combining forces with a whole bunch of people who wanted to do something and who wanted to get their hands dirty, we were able to transform that space into a vibrant community of like-minded manufacturers and small businesses. One of the fun things about it, and making this stuff fun is critical if you want to bring people in and get people excited. You can see our green roof here. I'm not generally a huge fan of green roofs, but we did this one with a little bit of assistance from a small business improvement fund grant from the city. That's my daughter Zoe, and she's planted in 9,600 individual sedum plants, each of which is a pixel in her image. That was the planting diagram as we went through it. So doing things that are a little bit unusual gets you the attention that you need to then get your message out there. That's one of the strategies. At the plant, we're taking a lot of the waste stream materials concepts that we used at the first building at the Sustainable Manufacturing Center, also known as Bubbly Dynamics, and taking that to a much greater extent by internally recycling as much of the material as we can, things like gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen, things like wastewater, all of that can be internally recycled. So if you can create these closed loop systems, you can make each of the processes within the facility more efficient. And that can be for-profit businesses, it can be our nonprofit. If you can just shave, even just shaving 10% off of someone's disposal costs, that's improvement. And that makes those businesses more sustainable and therefore more replicable. Starting with a derelict meatpacking plant is not easy, but it's a facility that is food grade or was food grade, that has floor drains everywhere, tremendously heavy floor loadings for supporting fish tanks and farming operations and kitchen operations. There's a lot of work involved though, and that's where volunteers come in, and that's where the concept of learning and sharing and fun comes in too, is getting people to come and help you with this utterly impossible task. So here we're cutting up smokehouses, stainless steel smokehouses, to build a classroom. Within the plant we have a dual structure, the for-profit business which owns the plant, Bubbly Dynamics, and then the nonprofit, Plant Chicago, which does the education and research activities at the plant. And then it's filled with small businesses, small farms, kitchen businesses, bakeries, a kombucha brewery that's been operating for quite a while, 2 beer breweries moving in, a cheese distributor moving in, and building a community that's 100% food. So everybody that's there is making food in some way or brewing. And sometimes you have crossover between farms where people are growing and processing. Other times they're just doing one or the other. This is a professor from IIT running a jackhammer. He's pretty good at it. So this diagram shows you a little bit about how we close those loops. And you don't have to have the whole system running for it to work. Even if you just have pieces, then you're already getting more efficient and you're getting more sustainable in how you do things. The heart of the whole thing is the anaerobic digester, which is horribly over budget and very late right now, but it will ultimately consume 30 tons of waste per day, food waste, from neighboring food industries. And that's going to come from our neighbors' Vantage oleochemicals, from breweries, from food stores. We live in a world that there's so much waste, and we put it in the ground every day, but it's not really waste, it's fuel. And this is mindless what we're doing. In the Midwest, our disposal fees, our tipping fees are so low that nobody thinks about it. You just put stuff down a hole and it's gone. And that's got to stop. We have to start assigning a value to what we put down that hole. It doesn't disappear, it actually goes someplace. And our hope is to bring it, if it's biomass, to the plant to power the whole facility. So this is one of the sections of our anaerobic digester that arrived a couple months ago. We have a long ways to go on the assembly of it, but taking in that 30 tons a day of food waste will make all of the energy, the electricity, the heating, the cooling, and everything that we consume at the plant to run the whole facility, about 380 kilowatt hours and 5 million BTU of waste heat, by consuming this biomass that people are paying to get rid of. The digester makes a saleable product at the back end, digestate, liquid and solid, which can be fertilizer, it can be a soil amendment, and it can be sold. And so, why aren't we doing this? It's capital intensive, and until very recently it was impossible in the city, but now there's been some changes, new composting ordinance that specifically allows anaerobic digestion. So the plant is, a lot of education goes on, and we bring in the general public. We have students all the time. We work with IIT and with UIC to bring students in. We run a farmer's market every Friday. Actually, we've stopped for the season in conjunction with Back of the Yards Neighborhood Council. And that farmer's market has brought a lot of new faces to the plant from the neighborhood, from Back of the Yards, which is great. That's what we want to do. So we have an outdoor farming operation that's very visible, and the idea, again, is to show people, where does your food come from? And then hopefully draw them in. So lots of people come from the neighborhood just curious. They're looking through the fence, what are you doing in there? And we invite them in and give them some strawberries or something. So the food businesses that we're incubating are, in some cases, well, this is from Pleasant House. They have a restaurant up in Bridgeport, and they make these royal pies, savory royal pies, which are quite delicious. They also grow both indoors and outdoors, so they're a tenant that crosses over. And in a fairly small kitchen on the second floor of the plant, they've got about 9 people working in there now, and they're there from 3 a.m. and into the night. It's kind of amazing. It's a lot of new jobs being made. Ultimately, we'll have about 140 permanent jobs in the plant, food jobs. This is Lauren Bushnell of Peerless Bread and Jam. That oven there is a masonry hand-built oven that she can do up to 70 loaves at once in. Right now it's fired by wood. Ultimately, once the breweries are operating, it's going to be fired by briquetted distiller's grain. So waste from inside the building that's going to be squished and dried using some waste heat from the combined heat and power system to fire the oven. And then on the waste heat side of the oven, we put provisions in for stainless coils so that we can gather the waste heat going out of the oven as part of the domestic hot water heating loop for the kitchens, because kitchens use huge amounts of hot water all day long. And she bakes great bread. Actually, Molly Breslin is the farmer that she buys her grain from, and Molly comes to the plant all the time. Lauren mills the grain right there in the space. So we've got 4 farms operating. One is the nonprofit farm, the Plant Chicago farm, that is, and we've got Greens and Gills, Sky Greens, and Urban Canopy are all operating inside of the building. And all a diversity of crops. Unfortunately, microgreens are the one that you can really make money on, and so that's what a lot of the farms are heading towards. The nonprofit farm does a lot of other things, though, too, and a lot of demonstration growing. We try to grow things that don't make sense, too. Mushrooms, these are pink oysters here. And in the basement of the plant, where we're taking advantage of the earth and the temperature of the earth and the humidity of the basement, we can grow enormous amounts of fabulous mushrooms, and quite a variety of them. So aquaponics is a big part of the nonprofit operation, and at least one of the for-profit farms. Aquaponics is one of those closed-loop systems that we like to demonstrate the waste loop. So you're feeding fish, fish are feeding plants, and the whole thing feeds you. And there are no fertilizers, there's no pesticides. One of the advantages of farming inside is you can control the environment very precisely, and you can grow year-round. And you can take advantage of the waste heat from the grow lights to help heat your building, which is a handy thing too. So you see there, we're up to 27,000 square feet of indoor farming now spread across the 4 farms. This is part of the nonprofit farm using recycled food-grade totes, which you can get anywhere in the world. They're a standard food-grade thing. Some of the beds are raft systems. Others are more traditional trays. We do a variety of things like kale, chard, basil, watercress, mint, mustard greens, a lot of different greens. Basil is popular in the winter, as you can imagine. We work with a lot of people, and we try to bring in as many as we can. So it ranges from school groups, bringing kids in, showing them about nurturing, getting their hands dirty. And that's a really important thing to teach kids about, is what's it like to take a seed. And I think in the video from Growing Home, someone was talking about that too. Taking that seed and seeing it grow into this wonderful thing. And that's critical. Teaching people about where the food comes from is so important.
About 60 seconds more, John.
Well, all right. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to demonstrate through action what you can do. What's the best case scenario, or a best case scenario? If you can make jobs where people need jobs, if you can remove the transportation, or at least reduce tremendously the transportation involved, then you're not spewing pollution everywhere, getting a vegetable here from California or from South America. If you can combine it in a closed loop system where you can take advantage of all of those waste products, then you're really, you can make it work. People look at the concept of vertical farming, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And if you do it in a glass skyscraper, it doesn't make any sense. But if you do it in a derelict old building that you convert, that you bought for $5.50 a square foot, because you can buy factories for those kind of prices, then it does make a lot of sense, especially if you're doing it where you can transport the produce by bicycle, which is what we do actually. That's how almost all of it's delivered from the Plant Chicago farm. And if you can do it where people can walk to work, and every bit of that waste is taken advantage of in some way or another.
Excellent,
Thanks.
excellent.
Thank you. All right.
And last but not least, Naomi.
Hey, everybody. So we're Blacks in Green, and at the beginning of the year, that band of blue there announced that we were going to be doing a victory garden, or return to the victory garden. And so we wanted to let our neighborhood know that along the way of Chicago becoming a city of villages, what we call the place where every household can walk to work, walk to shop, walk to learn, and walk to play, we were going to create a place where a self-sustaining whole of 1 square mile, sustainability 1 square mile at a time, could happen. The way that we created this experiment was what we call the Year of the Backyard Garden. And we went around door to door, putting out our flyers. I'm the newbie in the group, so we started at the beginning of the year, going door to door, because this is what we call the high cost of doing nothing in neighborhoods where like mine, where I live in West Woodlawn. People die on the street, and as surreal as that may seem, it is a reality on the ground. This is an example of us out taping the flyers to the fence posts, while even as we speak, they are tearing down yet another home in the neighborhood. We have about 2,300 parcels in the community and 860 vacant lots. We created the 8 principles of green village building, which you may have seen in the literature that was outside when you came in, to address the whole system problem common to Black communities everywhere. And we believed that if you have a whole system problem, only a whole system solution can transform it. And these are the realities on the ground that we live with in neighborhoods like mine. And in the context, the added context that communities of color contribute the least to global warming, but suffer the most from its damaging impacts. And this is a study that details some of those realities. Again, anyone who wants to study this more deeply with us, be in touch and we can give you a copy of these reports in this PowerPoint. So we asked the question, where is your village? Because the local living economy is one of the most effective greenhouse gas reduction strategies we know. And I don't know whether you know, that we have officially reached the tipping point of 400 parts per million greenhouse gas levels, which is the point at which Bill McKibben, our beloved Bill McKibben, has said we'll no longer have a planet similar to the one on which all of civilization developed and life on Earth adapted. Kind of scary, right? Okay, so we asked the question, where is your village? Because we want people to begin looking at sustainability 1 square mile at a time, and we want people to begin to look at what is the reality? What would have to create the reality to be able to walk to work, walk to shop, walk to learn, and walk to play? We teach a return to the old ways, grannynomics, and yeah, that's my granny. Where the values that ruled our households and guided our transactions when small was plenty. And we're looking at how to bring the Great Migration consciousness, the chutzpah, the courage to the place where we live, the tight little island of West Woodlawn, which was Chicago's first black middle-class neighborhood. Communities had lots of resources at that time. They had, but they were sequestered into a small amount of space. And that migration heritage is what we're looking to address mentally, emotionally, spiritually, to remind our neighbors their heritage and where they came from, because part of the problem, the core problem in neighborhoods like mine is the mindset. So we put on a musical called Migration the Musical, and we did this by creating story circles where we curated the stories of the people who lived there. We're working with the DuSable Museum. We'll be putting in a Great Migration heritage teaching garden there at the Roundhouse, the building that's on the bottom, as a way of providing continual education to the intergenerational body there. Now, this is the 8 principles of Green Village Building, and the one that's circled is the 4th principle. It's the one that generated the West Woodlawn Botanic Garden and Village Farm. It is part of our goal under this one of the 8 programs was this program, and our goal was to create 1 large sustainability teaching garden and 10 backyard gardens to get people to understand the do-for-self mentality from the ground up. This gives you a context of where we're located, just south of 400-acre Washington Park, just west of the University of Chicago. And again, some context because the Wood Street Farm, which is located on 59th Street, that zone that the city is creating to create an urban ag district, we have been proposing that our little community of West Woodlawn become sanctioned, adopted, and supported as an additional ag district with all of the pieces and parts associated with the food system that my allies here have talked about. This is the actual TIF district. Again, it's 64 blocks, 1,425 buildings, and many of them in a state of disrepair, part of the foreclosure tsunami. This is what it looks like south of Washington Park. This is the housing stock and the industrial stock samples that we live with, reality on the ground, and this is the dream. People say Eastern Market, it's 100 years old, it's impossible for you to achieve that, but we know that a whole system solution can be brought together on the ground if we start somewhere. This is an example of what a whole system, food system looks like, from production all the way to converting the waste at the end, like John has talked about. How can we do this within the context of development here in Chicago? This is the infrastructure, the policy infrastructure that we're working with. All of these plans have generated tactics, strategies and tactics on the ground, and we're one of them. So why create a botanic garden and village farm system in West Woodlawn? We feel that that beautiful red brick building was torn down in the middle of 2012. That gas station on the corner, which has been vacant for 30 years, we have a land use plan that we think will address the vacancy and the food production issues. A botanic garden being a place where you can create a relationship of stewardship, people working one with the land. There's Harry's farm, and the volume of food production that you associate with an urban farm is different from what you will find in the pocket parks and community gardens that will intersperse throughout West Woodlawn. So we started the year of the backyard garden. Next year is the year of the tree canopy, and it's all part of a 5-year proof of concept for green village building. Our experiment is, how many households can we feed? How many businesses or jobs can we create? How many neighbors could we train and engage? And how many gallons of stormwater could we divert? This is the land use plan that we are proposing. We're using the Botanic Garden as much as a cultural tourism destination as a food production district. And so our commercial corridors, 61st Street, 63rd, 65th, 67th, King and Cottage, they're laying fallow now. We see them arriving into full flower as a artisan guild cultural row, a restaurant row, and the farming district down near the industrial zone. The kinds of interlocking businesses that have been described to you today are all possible within the walkable village paradigm. These are the kinds of businesses, the kinds of products and services that are typical to, natural to, and able to evolve on the ground over time. This is not something we're expecting to achieve overnight, but we know these are the kinds of things that any of the neighbors in our walkable village can do. And so here we go. This is the actual on-the-ground pictures of what we did in West Woodlawn in 2013. This was my actual backyard garden, the place where only dogs went to poop, the limestone that was delivered by one of our donors, putting the garden in, building it up, using a system of irrigation to keep the vegetables on the top real fresh, the kinds of neighbors who worked on it with us, and the small harvest. What we're looking to do is have every apartment building have backyard gardens. And my landlord was good enough to donate the space, as well as our neighbors working in conjunction with them. Our goal was 10 backyard gardens. We got 4. We started in an empty, cold basement like many of our neighbors did, but we had fun. We had our classes in the basement, we had food, and we did our business down there. There you go, it's a real basement, but it was transformed too in the process. Again, because different kinds of people will be able to give different kinds of things, our landlord was able to donate the space and donate the renovation for a tax deduction. And so that's where we do our classes now. Okay, this was the lot that we transformed into the Sustainability Teaching Garden. Kicked off at the Center for Neighborhood Technology. The group that kicked it off, some of you know, but the Chicago Botanic Garden and Angelic Organics Learning Center, our neighborhood school, our neighborhood church, our food survey, and of course using Michelle Obama's Growing Home book with the vegetables that she planted as a part of this whole process. Donations from the state, donations of compost. There I am in all my glory. And again, young people from the neighborhood, you can see already how the transformation is taking place. And this is all volunteer labor, and Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. And so we started with these drawings at the beginning of the year, and we have translated them into our first slice of reality, and tomorrow is another day. Next year is another format, and we're looking forward to hearing from all of you. Come on out.
Excellent. Thank you much. Thank you so much for those great presentations. And again, just a word to the audience, probably another 10 minutes or so, I'll be going to you for your own questions. I think either there are mics around or there will be mics around. So since this is being recorded, don't yell out your questions, right? Go to the mic and we'll get you on the record as well. You know, this is interesting because, you know, we come for the food, right? We come to this discussion for the food. But as we get at these issues, it becomes more than that. It becomes a way, either by direct action or inadvertently or by happenstance, whatever it may be, to solve some really thorny issues in the city, everything from crime to urban development to the issue of waste. What's happening? I mean, what is bringing us to this mass, and how can we best take advantage of this moment? Any one of you.
Well, I think food is the natural thing to create communities, and I think we've lost it. I think over the years, people, where do you get your food? From the supermarket. That's where tomatoes come from. And people have lost that connection, and now that they're looking for a connection. They're looking for cultural connections and community connections, and building communities through food is a huge way to do that. I think also what we've seen here is there's this artificial borders between neighborhoods. So people talk about Englewood, back of the yards, Woodlawn, but we're all within a few miles of each other. If the plant has 140 jobs, those are perfect jobs for the people we're training. We're all working together to change these communities.
John, where are we? Well,
you know, we can't keep doing what we're doing. And I think people are starting to wake up a little bit to that fact. It's a tough battle because you're faced with so much advertising and with so much status quo of how things are done and where the food comes from. And enough people now are just starting to see, you know, this really doesn't make sense. We just can't do this anymore. And bringing it home, bringing it to where people live is just, it's a good way to be. And the community side of it is so important, of getting people together around food. That really is.
Yeah, I want to segue
central.
on that point because one of our key purposes in doing gardening as a practice was because we needed to reconstruct the fiber of community. People didn't know their neighbors. They didn't care who their neighbors were. Everyone was eyes straight forward, walking, in silos. And so the process of doing our work was really all about sharing information, like a barn raising, like the garden we put in the back of my apartment building. The whole block participated in putting that together, and vice versa. It's not like we're cut buddies now, but we have each other's phone numbers, we have each other's email, we return each other's calls, we cooperate and help each other when we can. That didn't exist before.
So now I got to push back a little bit because that's what I do. I mean, so you mean to tell me that it's that simple, that solving some of the issues of crime and lack of urban development and all these things that plague the city, that those things get fixed once we start thinking about food? That's the sort of linchpin kind of thing that kind of pulls in all these issues?
Well, yeah. I mean, people get inspired when they see people in action. And what you really find is people are really looking for an excuse to have something to say to each other, something nice to say, something other than a bitch and moan. And so, when Blacks in Green does programs, we're famous for always having food and wine when we can. That lubricates the possibility of love between neighbors. And in the war zone, especially where I am, and I know this is true wherever you are, when you're sharing food, it's a whole other story. And in a great migration community like West Woodlawn, where the cultural roots have been eviscerated. You know, we are looking to restore people's sense of self, a sense of place, and literally restore our place in the world. So it really matters, the land, the food, the story, the recipe.
Now, John, let me ask now. Oh, go ahead. You had a,
Oh, I was just
jump in,
saying, you
go
know, the walkable community is so critical to this too. And because then you are face to face with your neighbors, and then you are talking, and then the issues that matter to you, it turns out they matter to your neighbor as well. And that's, you know, that's a big part of it, being able to just walk past things and see them and walk in and buy something from your local merchant. It all helps.
now, talk a little bit more, John, about your operation. I mean, what I saw there looked terribly expensive. I mean, the end result, I love, obviously, as we all do, but getting there looks like it's expensive and it's hard to do. I mean, what are the lessons there that can be replicated?
Sure.
And just what...
Parts of it are very expensive. The anaerobic digester is very expensive, but it is not necessary by any means. It is kind of the icing on the cake, and it's the demonstration that says if we, people with literally no resources, I have an art degree, and are coming to this with, you know, without big financing, without anything like that, working with people from the community and volunteers, and we can take a cast-off industrial building and in a neighborhood that you know, a lot of people don't even want to think about, and we can turn it into a net zero space with very little money, and it really is very little money that we're talking about. This is a slow money model where you're rolling it back in. You get a tenant in, you get a little bit more income, and then you roll that back into the next build out. That's how I did the first building, and that's a model that really does work. All the recycled materials, waste stream materials, it doesn't take money, it takes creativity, and it takes looking at what you have, not what you wish you had.
So, and I'm going to get you in on this, Harry, as well. John, you know, you have an art degree, which is a good thing. Went to arts college, so that's a beautiful thing. You know, so what moves you to get in this vineyard, if you will? I mean, what did you see that motivated you to do this?
You know, for me, it came from a pretty obscure angle. I actually am a big industrial history buff, and I love factories, and I like being in factories, and trying to figure out a way to use the embodied energy that went into those buildings 100 years ago or whatever, and seeing that's still there, that value is still there. And that's where it started, but then as I started to look at the collateral benefits to the community, to the people that work there, to everybody around, you start building layers and layers of collateral benefits. The more locally you do everything, this hyper-local concept of the walkable community and of that recycling. And once I started to see that, it became exciting to see how much better and how much more closed the loops can be. And that's the driver behind it.
And Harry, I mean, how did you get there?
Well, my mom always had a garden and did her own composting, and I think that really influenced me personally growing up to have a connection with food. Always had family dinners, sitting down together. And so food has always been the thing. Anytime we get together, there's a holiday. Jewish holiday is always around food. Just like what you were saying, things happen around food. So anytime Growing Home does an event, there's food, and people come together. And I think just one thing you were saying, people walk like this. One reason is because they're afraid in these communities, often afraid to go to their house. So when there's an event that we have, people know it's safe. There's safe space. There's music. There's fun happening, a good time. When you bring people together and are gardening, bad things don't happen there.
They really don't.
Well, you know, let's unpack this a little bit more. When I think of a neighborhood like Englewood, for instance, coming from an urban planning background, if someone were to say, well, what's a fix for Englewood? I might think, like, what's a physical fix for Englewood? I might say new schools, a new community college. I mean, all these things that have gone into the neighborhood so far. But you looked at this and said, gardens? I mean, how did you see that?
I think what's lacking is investment in the infrastructure that's going to lead to economic activity and jobs. People are standing around because there aren't jobs. Most of the people that graduate, and we had this year 90% of the people got jobs, many of them were some in Bedford Park, some in Niles. They weren't in Englewood. So we need to figure out how we can develop jobs in Englewood. If there's, and nearby, the plant, Woodlawn. When there's the Eastern Market, in Woodlawn, there will be jobs for people in Englewood. And that's what's really going to bring about change is investment. But investment, we're talking about, we need to see tens of millions of dollars go into these communities for economic development.
And to that point, I mean, is the city a good partner in this? How good of a partner has the city been? I mean, we see that the city can lure Sarah Lee from the suburbs and spend money in that, and that's a good thing, I guess. But do you see a partnership to that level with your own endeavors and the city itself?
Well, we're all working on that.
We're working on it.
Well, we decided to.
This is where they get politics, right? That's very diplomatic of you.
We decided to do our model differently and start with the neighbors rather than with the city. It's why our approach was with backyard gardens, the independence, the sovereignty of the neighbor to do what they needed to do, and our ability to relate to them directly in that process. And for us, similar to Harry's goal, is that it was really about economics. It was about increasing household income, and how can a neighbor spend less, save more, do more for self that translated at the bottom line. And so our goal has been to structure this ongoing program as like a WPA-style make-work project, that we can actually draw down the funds or generate the funds to pay neighbors, zone the walkable village of West Woodlawn, select, train neighbors to be stewards on a zoned basis, so that we're actually paying ourselves to do the work of our own place. And usually it's more of a trickle-down approach, or more of an indirect relationship. You may travel from someplace to your job, but we thought that by incentivizing people financially, and of course everyone's getting paid every day, you think you shouldn't have to pay people to be stewards of their place, but guess what? You do. So this is our experiment to see, can we get a critical mass of neighbors stipended, let those flourish into some kind of entrepreneurship or employment within the walkable village of West Woodlawn, and see the ripple effect of that.
Does the business, well, let me get the question this way then. How a city functions typically? Obviously, historically, has been the opposite of this, right? The food is grown in the hinterlands, and is brought, it's trucked in, and it's shipped out, or it's consumed here. Here, we sort of eat and grow where we live and where we work. Are there barriers to this? We're used to going this way. Now we got to go this way. And are there barriers to us changing how we do business this way?
So many.
Talk about some, or better yet, ones that you've encountered. And there may be things that are sort of structurally there, maybe benign, but only become an issue when you run up against them.
Yeah, I mean, convincing the powers that be that this even makes sense, or that this is a good thing, is a battle that we've been working on for years and years and years. We, going through contentious conference calls where we got yelled at by the zoning department, and just this stubborn status quo of how things are done and how things should be done, and trying to introduce these new ideas about a new way. It's just you're talking to a wall sometimes.
Well, it's in the infrastructure of the whole system. If you look downstate, Harry and I serve on the Illinois Food, Farm, and Job Council together, and 94% of what we eat in Illinois comes from outside of the state. And all of our farmland, beautiful, lovely, fertile farmland, mostly of it goes to corn and soy production. And so there's extreme resistance to doing the agricultural system any different way. It's a long game. It's just Chinese water torture, just drip, 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 drip until you get it to overflow.
How do you break that?
What seems to me encouraging is the change that's happened in Chicago since I started doing this. And I think it's really on a local level that the change is going to come about. 10, 12 years ago, especially before the recession, no alderman would say, no, we're going to use urban land for farms. But now there's all this vacant land, and there isn't housing. And they see that this other development that they had talked about isn't happening. And so because of the work that's being done at the ground level, change has come about, and there's been policy changes in the city. And even nationally, everyone's talking about local food. Michelle Obama has her garden. These things wouldn't have happened without the work that so many people have been doing on the grassroots level. And it's going to take all of us working together. It's going to take urban farms that are doing a lot of production. It's going to take the backyards farms. It's going to take changing warehouses. All of us, by being successful, then it seems the politicians say, hey, some of this is working. And they're going to want Alderman Folks. We work real closely with her. She comes to every event we have. They're going to want to be involved in it because they see it's working.
Is it, and we're going to go to questions from the audience in just a few minutes. Is it just coincidence that all of this is happening on the South Side? Or,
No.
Or just that these are the people who I picked, and there you go. I mean, like, is there something about the South Side that's prompting this?
Land.
Land.
That's a big part of
There's
it.
just a huge acres and miles of vacant land. And so, as Harry just alluded to, some of the development that was anticipated not coming, the question is, well, how do you get any value from what is otherwise laying fallow? And the foreclosure tsunami had a lot to do with the level of vacant land because the buildings are being torn down.
And it is a frightening thing. I lived in Beverly and then moved out briefly for 2 years, and then moved back to Beverly and caught the Rock Island train in. And I was shocked from that how much had cleared out just from 09 and from 09 to 11. And in fact, the census numbers kind of bear that out, that 200,000 people left the city, mostly from the South Side. So you're right. This issue of land is certainly a driver in this that you guys see.
And we're looking at that land as an asset. Because instead of saying how, there's vacant land and that's leading to crime, we say we could grow food on this land. We can have businesses on this land.
Talk a bit more, and if you got questions, please come to the mic or begin to make your way there. Where does this food go, and how much of it is there? The two of you.
Right now, we're not solving the food desert problem by having urban farms, but more and more food is being grown in the community. We have a farm stand right on our farm that a few years ago hardly anyone was coming to. Then when we really started doing outreach, we saw sales and activity triple there 2 years ago, and this past year it doubled again. So it's slowly getting food in, and it's not the food, the urban farms themselves that's going to solve the problem, but it's other entities, the plant, the cafes, making the communities vibrant again through food that's going to bring about that change.
Excellent point, John.
And also just knowing where your food comes from. Know your farmer, they say. But knowing somebody that works in the food industry, you start to have a better appreciation for the difference between extruded corporate food and something that's real, that's been grown by people and touched by people.
Extruded corporate food isn't real?
And that's, the more you learn about food, the more you're going to demand local, and you're going to demand quality and not toxic bioengineered food. And that's That's important too. The market, the food market in any metropolitan area is so vast that, I mean, kind of like what Harry's saying, we could grow stacked to the ceiling here and we're still not even touching it. And so we might as well be making those jobs where people need them.
Good point, good point. I think we got some questions from the audience. There is one to there, and the man who just raised his hand, I guess if you make your way to the mic, but there's one there.
Hi.
Okay, great. Gotcha. All right.
First of all, thank you for all of your work. Great job. I just wanted to see if any of you have thought about additional steps of adding like beehives, chickens, cows to any of these scenarios, and what does the city have to say about that?
Me.
Naomi, go ahead.
Yeah, we actually, I didn't get a chance to show you this picture because Miss Monica is, as she calls herself, very, very, very private. But we did also add our first chicken family to the block this year. 5 chickens, and she'll tell you in great detail all about them. And we also have a partnership with the North Lawndale Employment Network. We tried to get the hives in this year. You know, they got to go in by a certain date for the bees to be happy and do their thing. But for certain, we have a whole system that we're looking to integrate that will include the bees.
But what does the city think about that? I mean, raising chickens in the city, 20 years ago, that was a sign of hickory, of backwardness. But now it's...
There's the backyard chicken, what is it called?
Enthusiasts.
Enthusiasts, that's right.
Advocates for urban agriculture have the bomb site. They do courses. Martha Boyd.
Martha Boyd is the chicken woman.
Martha Boyd, yeah. It's true, and hundreds of people. I mean, you can get standing room only at these backyard chicken events, and so whenever you see it come up, get your tickets early.
And it started when there was an alderman who tried to ban chickens. Because chickens have been allowed in Chicago for years. But as soon as someone tried to ban them, then this group got together and really organized, and there's been a lot taking off since that time.
That is interesting. A question here.
Oh, sure. The West Woodlawn approach seems very scalable, but I'm wondering about the other ones. Harry, you mentioned that there was an ordinance passed that made urban farms more doable. I'm wondering more information about that and what impact you really think it'll have. And in terms of the plant, John, is that something where we can only hope for a few of those because they require so much upfront investment, it seems like, to really close all those loops? Or is that something you think to be scaled can happen all over the city given the challenges we're facing in terms of waste?
No, the main idea is the replicability of it. And if you can just take a small slice of it without the really expensive pieces, just the combining of activities, whether it's combining residential with farming or widget manufacturing with farming, where you can take advantage of some portion of those waste loops, be it just waste heat, for instance, is a huge resource. And so, one of the goals here is by having these for-profit tenants in the plant, if they succeed and they make money, then other people start to take notice, and it happens automatically all over the place without us even pushing it. And so you'll see from that replicable model that people are starting to do it, and it's starting to make a lot more sense. And that's been one of the problems with zoning code and with the old way of doing things, is that it specifically prevented you from doing these things together. And that's what's changing, and the city is starting to understand that.
And when we started before this ordinance passed, our farm was called a technical institute, because there was no zoning code for urban farming. And there were all these, we had to do these landscaping and fencing, and there were we were viewed as a development. So there were all these things we had to do that were very costly, and the ordinance has changed that, has recognized urban farms in the zoning code, and has made it, these other prohibitions much more flexible that allow it to be more affordable.
That's a big step. That's a big step. There's a question right here.
Have you had any dealings with the University of Chicago, positive or negative? Have they said anything about it, or are they keeping quiet, or they're just hatching anything behind closed doors?
Well, you know, the University of Chicago is six of one and half dozen of the other. They, when people go by our sustainability teaching garden and they understand that the backyard gardens are there, they absolutely love it. No one who could not love it. However, you know, the forces of development and this issue of how much vacant land a neighborhood has brings us squarely within to the question of real estate development, gentrification, and warehousing land for later use. So if you don't have an infrastructure to own the land, then as is made available by neighbor space and putting it into a land trust, then you are perched precariously within the talons of the university, which is quite clearly has a plan for redeveloping West Woodlawn, which you know, is unspoken, but very, very clear and in line with history. So we have lots of very good friends at the University of Chicago who I taught our 8 Principles of Green Village Building class there, have allies who are going to be working with us on our on future programs. But where real estate development is concerned, it's tricky.
We've got one question in the back. We've got about 5 minutes left, but there's one question in the back there.
Thank you. That leads into my question. When I was a suburban college student over 30 years ago, I remember coming into Chicago on some sort of a volunteer effort and going into a basement somewhere, and I noticed all these signs had been painted. Wicker Park is not for sale. Well, since then, Wicker Park has been sold. And in fact, in my neighborhood, Lincoln Square, my wife and I bought a property 25 years ago. Within 15 or 20 years, it was worth 5 or 6 times what we paid for it because we were in the right place at the right time. But I'm thinking that all of you and your wonderful efforts might be in the wrong place at the wrong time if you don't have clear title for the properties that you're owning, because you could do a great job developing these communities, and then suddenly the value of the property goes up significantly, the taxes go up significantly, developers become interested, and suddenly you're competing with others who have more assets than you do. So I'm wondering, what's the long-term plan for these efforts?
Good question.
Well, these guys do own land.
Yeah, our Wood Street farm we own. It was given to us from the city for $1 through through an agreement with the city. It took 3 years, though, to complete that agreement and get a building permit. Now it's a little bit easier, but as Naomi was talking about, neighbor space is a way to make sure that land is kept in perpetuity for these projects and not developed.
But you know, but there's a interesting aspect to that question that, you know, artists, for instance, you know, they go into these so traditionally have gone through these communities similarly, and they sort of you know, because they're cheap, they're affordable, and then something happens around them which ends up driving them out. So in this case, you own your land, so you won't be driven out. But the idea of creating an affordable neighborhood around that, is that in some way imperiled by the forces of real estate? That
Well, the affordable, the community land trust is the same tool that Neighbor Space uses that anyone can use. And so Blacks and Green is adopting that vehicle for sustained affordability. And there, you know, there are other mechanisms that we're exploring, but there is no substitute, to your point, there is no substitute for owning the land. I mean, unfortunately, we've arrived at the commoditization of land in our civilization as a culture, but be that as it may, you've got to get your piece of the rock, and you're quite correct. If you don't own it, you're vulnerable.
Got about 4 minutes left. I think there's a question to the south. Here? Yeah.
Hi. Thanks to all 3 of you for really provocative presentations. So much to take in here, but very, very inspiring. I had a question for Harry and wanted to just ask you about the USDA certification that I think was in one of your slides. It just struck me that all of the good work that you're doing can have a stumbling point at the very end if people don't trust that what they're receiving from these gardens has been in some way either certified or inspected or what have you. And I just wonder if you could comment on how that whole process worked, because the USDA, love it or not love it, I'm sure probably is part of your life.
Yeah, from the time we started at Growing Home, we've always believed in having our farms certified organic so that there's a third party that does the inspection and says, yes, you're doing it according to best practices. When you're talking about smaller gardens, most of them aren't going to be certified organic. I think one thing we've been talking about AUA is having some type of best practices just that we can share with organizations. I know NeighborSpace and Open Lands do that so that people will know what is safe and what are the best ways to grow food.
I think we've got one more question. Yes, gentleman standing up.
First off, hi, John. I was wondering, actually, particularly, John, because you are actually growing animals for food. I was wondering, is there any particular challenges you've run into, and more interestingly, are there actually codes that are against that? Has it been a problem selling the stuff that you're growing commercially as food?
Well, there were some serious barriers. You know, we were told, no, absolutely not.
That's a barrier. That's a barrier.
And, you know, in writing, with several signatures on it. And so, but being told privately, do it, we want you to do it. And so, you know, what do you do in that case? Well, we did it. And so, following best practices, first off, of course, the market is certainly there. We do not do any processing of fish because we're not a USDA-certified facility for that, inspected, I should say. But we can sell whole live, essentially. The city health inspectors are at the plant all the time. The state wholesale inspectors are there all the time. And so by following the standard practices for these things, we make sure that everything is good that way. But eventually, I'd like to see a lot more livestock being raised as well.
And,
Well,
and Lee, can I just say one
very
last
quickly,
thing
yes.
back to the land issue, is we are encouraging our neighbors. There's a program that the city of Chicago has, the ANLAP program, where you can buy the adjacent lot to your home. And we're producing a workshop on November 21st, Who Owns West Woodlawn, and how you can, and walking people through the process, among other things, of how they can acquire the land to that very important point.
Excellent. We'll have to let that be the last word on this great subject. So I want to thank again our guests, Harry Rhodes, John Edel, and Naomi Davis. Thank you much.
Thank you.
And thank you.